I'm personally pansexual, so I was just wondering what your views on same-sex couples were.
I don't have a negative view of same-sex couples, but I do have a negative view of a tyranny of the minority. So I think that in the name of protecting against a tyranny of the majority, and there are times in this country's history where we have had a tyranny of the majority, we have now, in the name of protecting against tyranny of the majority, created a new tyranny of the minority. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think that somebody who's religious should be forced to officiate a wedding that they disagree with. I don't think somebody who is a woman who's worked really hard for her achievements should be forced to compete against a biological man in a swim competition. I don't think that somebody who's a woman that respects her bodily autonomy and dignity should be forced to change clothes in a locker room with a man. That's not freedom, that's oppression.
All right, folks, so Vivek Ramaswamy was campaigning the other day at the Iowa State Fair, and he was confronted with a question I don't think we've really heard him talk about much yet on the campaign, which is, how do you feel about the, we'll say it like this, rainbow flag pride movement? Right. And, I actually have not seen this clip yet. We're watching it live. But from what I am told, he very brilliantly and masterfully turns the liberals' question on its head and kind of, shuts down the entire talking point and argument. And it is, of course, another, from what I've been told at least, brilliant Vivek Ramaswamy clip that we're going to react to here today. Now, before we do that, though, I do want to give you the context by telling you that the woman who confronts him in the clip we're about to watch here, apparently, according to reports, is a pansexual woman. Okay. Now, so of course, some of you, I guess, older folks may be asking the question, right, of what the heck, Vince, is a pansexual? Okay. And normally, under normal circumstances, I would completely agree with you. I also, want to, of course, beg the question, a pansexual? What, you identify as pans? You want to have sex with pans? Like, what does that even mean? But of course, as you know, we recently were given a community guideline strike by YouTube. So in order to play it safe and appease our dark YouTube overlords, I will, of course, say that pansexualism is a 1,000, 1,000 is not enough. Frankly, a 1 billion% real and valid gender identity. And of course it exists in a state of nature. What, you don't look around at the human natural state of being and say, oh wow, pansexual, yeah, that's totally a real thing that natural human beings do. You don't do that? What are you, some kind of bigot? I fully respect, frankly, folks, I fully respect this woman's right to identify as a pan and or have sex with pans. And frankly, if you disagree with that, if you think that's a little bit weird or strange or just kind of odd in any form, okay, frankly, you're just a bigot, and I think you need to really check your own privileges and check your own biases here, okay? She is a brave, wonderful pan, not a woman. She identifies as a pan, okay? A brave, wonderful pan, and, it's, of course, 1,000% a real thing. Please don't ban us again, YouTube. Okay, anyways, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to react here to the video of Vivek Ramaswamy taking on the frying pan sexual. But before we do that, really quickly, I do need to tell you about our sponsors today over at Noble Gold Investments. Because, folks, did you know that the US dollar has lost 85% of its value since we went off of the gold standard in the 1970s? And that shouldn't be shocking to you, especially nowadays, because you look at inflation, you are all already familiar with that. You're familiar with Bidenomics. And of course, we are headed into an election year, which of course likely will mean more economic stability, especially in regards to the stock market, which is why you need to protect your investments with gold, which, as you may know, is the time-tested hedge against inflation and economic instability. And the best way to do that is by checking out our friends over at Noble Gold Investments. They can set you up with a number of different options, mainly a gold IRA, right? That's a retirement account backed by physical gold instead of unstable stocks. But they'll also let you know about other ways. You, of course, can learn more by going over to thevincedao.gold.com. Again, that is thevincedao.gold.com. Put in your information there. They will contact you and let you know more about the best way to protect your investments with gold at thevincedao.gold.com. So be sure to go check them out. All right, folks, with that said, let's get into this. Here is Vivek Ramaswamy versus The pan. Here we go.
I was just wondering, what were your opinions on the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, I don't think it's one community.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, how could it be? Just mashed together an alphabet soup. Trans is fundamentally in tension with gay, if you ask me. But
It is an
what's your
alphabet
opinion?
soup.
I'm personally pansexual, so I was
Okay.
just wondering what your views on same-sex couples were.
I don't have a negative view of same-sex couples, but I do have a negative view of a tyranny of the minority. So I think that in the name of protecting against a tyranny of the majority, and there are times in this country's history where we have had a tyranny of the majority, we have now, in the name of protecting against tyranny of the majority, created a new tyranny of the minority. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think that somebody who's religious should be forced to officiate a wedding that they disagree with. I don't think somebody who is a woman who's worked really hard for her achievements should be forced to compete against a biological man in a swim competition. I don't think that somebody who's a woman that respects her bodily autonomy and dignity should be forced to change clothes in a locker room with a man. That's not freedom, that's oppression. And so I believe that we live in a country where free adults should be free to dress how they want, behave how they want, and that's fine. But you don't become oppressive by foisting that on others. And that especially includes kids, because kids aren't the same as adults. And so I think adults are free to make whatever choices they want, but do not foist that ideology onto children before children are in a position as adults to make decisions for themselves. And so I think a lot of the frustration in the country, and if I'm being really honest, that I also share, comes from that new culture of oppression where saying those things can actually get somebody punished. And in my case, it's part of why it's my responsibility to say them. And I respect that you may have a different opinion, and that's okay. Part of what makes our country great is that you and I can be civil and have this conversation, and that we live in a country that still gives us, each of us, the right to speak to a presidential candidate and back, and still say that we pledge allegiance to the same nation. So I think that's the beauty of our country, and that's my honest opinion.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks.
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your civility as well. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. Well, there you have the sort of exchange there. I thought it's very brilliant from a political perspective. Because, and this is very interesting, because Donald Trump, I noticed, does the same thing on the topic of abortion, which is he kind of takes it and turns it on its head to say, look, we are not the radical ones. You guys on the left are the radical ones. Right. So notice how he kind of navigates the issue on that front to say, look, the conservatives who don't want a tyranny of the minority and don't want all of this crazy nonsense taught in the schools, because the conservative position is not the radical one. It is the left wing position that's the radical one. It's sort of you could argue it's a little bit of a deflection, but I think at least for a political candidate, it's a brilliant way to turn this whole sort of argument on its head. And then Vivek here also does what he does best, which is he's very good at diffusing conflict and kind of at the end making her, I guess, obviously I think we disagree on politics, but at least, sort of diffused in terms of the anger, brings down the temperature. It's something that Vivek's very good at rhetorically. Now, what I will say on the substance of it is that, and before people say this, because look, 100% I agree with you guys, that I am a little bit more socially conservative than that, right? And I've talked about before in the past why I don't really think that the LGB is that separate from the T. I think they're kind of similar points on the slippery slope. And, I have what many people would call pretty traditional views on this stuff. But I think at the same time, part of why I said it's a good answer is I think it's a good answer for a political candidate, okay? Because as much as I am, and let me just address this because I know people will say that, as much as I am a social conservative, and don't get me wrong, I agree with you guys, okay? If it were up to me, every candidate should be campaigning on a national abortion ban, and we're going to restore traditional marriage and all this different stuff, make Christ king of America, all of that stuff. But, sadly, we live in a majority rule in many ways system, do we not? And so I think you need to employ the tactic of incrementalism, especially in regards to a lot of these culture war topics, which is to say, look, we've rolled to this point down the slippery slope, and it's unfortunate. We should have never got here. But in order to push back the slippery slope, right, in order to kind of return to traditional values as a country, it's kind of a one at a time thing, right? So I do think that on the alphabet issues, we do need to start, because currently the battle's over the T, right? We need to first win the battle over the T, And then we can talk about what to do about the rest of the slippery slope, which I, as a social conservative, want to do. But the reason I bring that up is because I know there's a lot of social conservatives who will say stuff like, the answer is too moderate, which again, I agree with you that it is. But they do the same thing with abortion, right? A lot of pro-lifers say, why won't Republicans campaign on a national abortion ban? Because obviously that's what we want as pro-lifers. To which I say, like I said, that's the ideal goal, but we got to get there by marching up the hill, right? I think a good analogy to make is, let's say we're in World War II, okay? Let's say Japan just bombed Pearl Harbor, which is them, doing the stuff in the schools, right? Drag queen story hour, okay? Japan just bombed Pearl Harbor, and we need to get to Japan and beat Japan, okay? But how do you do that? You can't just invade Japan overnight in the same sense. You can't just say national abortion ban or repeal same-sex marriage overnight, right? You need to first get there. So first you need to win the battle that they're currently, you need to keep the, I should say this, you need to keep the territory that they're currently trying to take, which I would argue is this T issue, right? The transformer issue and the issue of the stuff in the schools. So first we need to win that battle. That's the Battle of Midway. Let's make that analogy, right? We need to win that battle, and then we need to start island hopping to get to Japan, right? I'm going to get war nerd about this, but Guadalcanal, New Guinea, the Philippines, Okinawa, Iwo Jima, and then you're in striking distance of Japan. In the same sense, just to address the social conservative argument, I think some of us need to just recognize that's what we're going to have to do as a country. I say that all to say, I think for a political campaign, it's not what I would say. If you ask me, what is your opinion on those issues, I'd probably give a more conservative answer. But as a political campaign, as a political strategy for an issue that frankly is controversial, same thing with abortion, I think the best thing for Republican candidates to do is do what Vivek did and do what Trump does on the pro-life issue, which is turn it on its head and say, look, we're not the radicals, even though maybe in some ways we are, right? Because we are radically right. We are radically moral. Right? That's what we want. But, in the context of the conversation, we're not the radicals. You guys are the ones who bombed Pearl Harbor, right? Not us. You see what I'm saying? So that's all to say. I think it was actually a pretty well-handled answer by Vivek. And I know there's some social conservative types who would argue he could have answered it better. And again, I don't disagree. But I think this is another sort of masterclass in rhetoric on his part of how he can sort of diffuse the conversation, right? About how he can take, a radical who thinks that they're a moderate and say, no, you're the real radical. I'm the voice for unity. I'm the voice for common sense. I think it's good rhetorical strategy. But you guys can let me know what you think about his answer on this. Did you think it was adequate? Did you think it was good? I think at the very least, He kind of shut it down, right? He kind of shut down what she was trying to come to the table with. And like I said, I think that framing on the more controversial social issues like alphabet stuff, like pro-life, I think that sort of strategy of painting the other side as the radical, I think that's the right way to do it. You know what I mean? And I understand some people are not going to like that, but I think it's a part of maturity, It's like we can say every Republican should be campaigning on a national abortion ban. I agree. I agree with you guys, but we need to get there. So how do we get there? Because, we're at midway right now. So how can we get all the way to Japan overnight? You have to, and understand the left took over this country over the span of decades. We did not get to this point overnight. Now, a lot of people maybe did not notice until a couple years ago, but notice how over time they were slowly degrading social norms, right? First it was feminism, and then it grew into more feminism, and then it grew into the gender stuff, and then next thing the Thomas dude is in the, winning the women's swimming competitions. We didn't get there overnight. In the same sense, I think if conservatives want to take back the country, then we can't get there overnight either. We need to do answers like, at least for politicians. If you hear me on this channel, I'll just tell you what I think, because that's my job. But for politicians, for people campaigning, I think this is what you got to do, right? You gotta kind of push back slowly, sort of plant the seeds of retaking the culture overall, which hopefully is the end goal. But let me know what you think of all of that in the comment section below. And before you go, again, folks, be sure to leave a like on the channel. Subscribe if you are new. Check out our friends over at thevincedao.com, and be sure to follow me on all of my social medias. Links are in the description. And until next time, folks, Alpha moves only. God bless. Have a very good day, and peace.